Hello, everyone. Welcome to Pause for Pedagogy. This is a conversation with Brittany Adams-Pope about the Equine Industry Program at the University of Louisville with the International Leadership Association. My name is Dan Jenkins, and I'm Chair and Associate Professor of Leadership and Organizational Studies at the University of Southern Maine and co-editor of Pause for Pedagogy. The ILA and I are thrilled to welcome Brittany to our latest conversation in the Pause for Pedagogy series. Welcome, Brittany.
Welcome. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So glad to have you here. Can you start by just telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so like you said, I'm in the Equine Industry Program in the College of Business at the University of Louisville. It's a not very well-known program. To be very honest, didn't know about it until they called me for an interview. It is the only equine-based program housed in a College of Business in the entire world. So we're a very niche program, been around for about 30 years, which is shocking. We have about 60 to 80 students at any given time. It's business-based, which is a little new for me, coming from a College of Agriculture and being specifically in agricultural leadership. So I love horses, and when they told me about the program, I said, yeah, I think that I could do that for sure. So it's been really fun. I've been here since 2014. I get to talk about horses all day, every day, and do leadership all the time with them. So it's been really, really fun.
That's great. Yeah. So let's jump right in. Learn a little bit about the article and then some of the details that you shared with us. So clearly, I invited you to, after hearing about the work that you did, to participate and to write this article for us. So as you were putting together the article and kind of sharing the story, what were some of the key things you were hoping to share or kind of respond to in authoring the article?
Yeah, so the request was very welcomed, and then when I started writing, it was way more difficult than I anticipated. I think I've gotten that point across in my emails, but what I do as far as equine assisted education is, I don't know that it's even new anymore. It's just, it's very unique. A lot of people don't even think to use horses as an educational tool. I've been riding since I was about 6, and so they're very, very every day to me. I see my horses every single day. So when you asked me to write this, I thought it would be really easy and it would be fine, but it's hard to talk about something that's not every day to everybody else. So I really wanted to get the point across that you don't necessarily have to use the horses. Just getting our students and even as an educator out of the classroom brings in so many environmental ways of learning. So I wanted to, my biggest point of concern anytime I'm talking about horses is safety. So I didn't want to give readers too much.
Right.
It's one of those don't try this at home kind of things, unless you're with a trained facilitator. But I also wanted to give readers enough that they saw the value in what we do and how much fun we have. And so it started with my dissertation at the University of Florida, and it's just kind of grown big, small, all kinds of directions since then.
Very good. So tell me a little bit more about kind of the practice of using horses to teach leadership as a pedagogy that you discuss. What does it look like, feel like, smell like to use horses and use the equine approach to teach leadership to students?
Yeah, so because I'm with them all the time, I see a side of horses that isn't scary. It's not intimidating. It's a very comfortable place for me, and it's taken me a second to learn that it's not a very comfortable place for everybody. But it encourages a lot of authenticity from humans because horses are seeking that all the time. In the article, I say that horses are always seeking a leader. They don't necessarily want to be the herd leader. And they will if they don't see leadership around them. So it's easy for us to, as a human that has been around horses, to embody that every day, but you can't fake horses. They see right through you in every way. So if it's the fake it till you make it, it doesn't work with them, which creates almost a boundary for people that are trying to fake it. It points a big shiny light on anyone that is, oh, I'm a leader and I know leadership and I'm authentic and I know who I am. And the horses will be like, actually, no, I think you're lying. And they do that in their facial expressions. They're very, very animated with their ears. That's the way that I teach people. First thing is read their ears. If their ears are forward, they're alert and they're hopefully happy. If their ears are back, that means that you're doing something that they don't like. It's a very easy way. They're much easier to read than other animals because their ears are so dynamic, and they can turn almost 180 degrees as a fun fact, so they can hear and feel all around them. So it smells like a farm, for better or for worse. It depends on where we are. Around here, we normally work in a round pen, which can be, I don't know, 25 to 50 feet in diameter. I never work alone because I just can't pay attention to everything that's happening all the time. So specifically with my dissertation research, because it was the biggest program or the most lengthy program that I did with the actual research to back it up, I had 13 middle school aged boys, and I had at least two other sets of eyes, and a kid still was actually kicked by one of our horses, and none of us saw it happen because it all happens very quickly. So making sure that you have a lot of people, you don't need a whole crowd of people watching, but at least you and one other professional helping the obstacles or the actual facilitation activities happen. It can be anywhere from washing a horse, literally just giving it a bath. That is how I teach heart. I worked off of Bill George's authentic leadership model. It was easy to transition those into horse-related activities. And so just talking about, why do we like to be clean? Do we judge people that aren't? And what does that say about you? Or creating a fear response in the horses and asking the kids or whoever you're working with at the time, how did that make you feel to see the horse so nervous? And those kind of things obviously need to happen in a very structured setting, but we also do really cool obstacle courses. Everything happens on the ground, which is the most exciting part for those that are risk averse. You don't have to know how to ride. You don't need to know how to do anything around horses. Most of these kids did not know. Most of my participants don't know anything about horses, which is actually kind of nice, starting with a blank slate. But we do for self-discipline as an easy example. It's called Life's Little Obstacles. And we put them in a round pen, and I'll put like a pile of carrots and a bucket of feed and a hay bale. And you can't bribe them and you can't touch them, but you have to get them through the obstacle course without stopping at all of these temptations. And it's a very similar exercise for Temptation Alley. And when you get to the end, whatever happened in the in-between, whether the horse made it or you left him back at the starting line eating the carrots, you learned something when you got to the end. And the kids felt the frustration and they felt the success. So the debriefing part of it is probably, it is very easily the most important, because you do have to pull, which I think other facilitators would feel about anything that's a little out of the norm. You do have to pull all of those things back together to bring it full circle for them. So even if they wouldn't have seen it on their own, I can say, well, how did it make you feel when you couldn't touch them? Because we all just want to kind of physically push them along, and that would get you disqualified, whatever that meant at the time. So the leadership skills and abilities just kind of come out naturally with the horses because they're big. They're a little intimidating. They do what they want most of the time, and sometimes that's what we want, and sometimes that's not. So it can look like a lot of different things.
Sure.
People that have watched get to the end and they're like, I had no idea, when we're debriefing, and I'm like, but what about this? And they're like, oh, I guess I did learn that. And it's really fun to see all the light bulbs click on because they were having so much fun when it was happening. Fun, frustration, a little bit of everything. It's really fun to get to the end and pull the leadership lessons out of that.
That's great. No, I appreciate the sharing of some of those detailed examples and the experiences there. Where did kind of the idea or the need for this work come from? I mean, who put these pieces together?
Right.
At some time?
So it happened. My mom, I'll give a quick shout out. Her name is Bev Adams. She is a human resources. She's retired now, but she did human resources forever, and she's also a certified life coach. And when I was a junior at the University of Georgia, she went to California for some life coaching thing because I was too young to think that was cool at the time. And she met someone that did a therapeutic-based, actual psychotherapy-based program. And she called me and she said, Britt, I know I was going to go to vet school, and then I decided I didn't really want to go to vet school, and I was kind of foundering along in my path. She said, I think this could be really cool. So I actually added psychology as a second major to my animal science degree. And that was my plan. And then it was not so much what I wanted to do psychotherapy wise. It was more, I just wanted to teach people. So after getting my master's in agricultural leadership it just seemed like a perfect fit for this. So I sought out, it's called the Equine Assisted Growth and Learning Association. EGALA is what they're known as the most. So I went to a couple of certifications. I learned some more things. They call it untraining, especially for horse people, because I'm not too proud to say we think we know everything when it comes to the horses because we've been doing this forever, regardless of how old you are. But they spend a lot of time taking away all of those initial ideas that you have about how to work with the horses in a certain situation, and they really just make you a blank slate to absorb the safety side of it and how to debrief appropriately and things like that. So when I got to the University of Florida, I asked my advisor, her name's Nicole Stedman, I said, I don't know how this dissertation thing works, but I would love to use horses if I could. And she was awesome and said, okay, sure, how will we do that? So I showed her I actually took a graduate class out for her to the farm where my horses lived when we were in Gainesville, and did a small program just on our master's class, master's PhD. And she loved it. And she's like, okay, I see what you mean. And so it just it went from there. It's bigger now. There is an organization called the Equine Experiential Education Association. All of the little associations are little, though. It's still not really understood. The research on it when I was trying to research for my dissertation was almost impossible to find anything, and now more people are seeing it. It's happening at executive coaching seminars and things like that. So it's growing, but it was definitely that would have been back in 2005 or 6. It was brand new, and so I didn't even have anybody to call and say, hey, could this work, because nobody really knew. But it's kind of evolved a lot from there. And it just needs to be researched more for people to take it more seriously. When my program here, being in a college of business, I'm already like the odd kid in town, being the horse girl. And so I've paired up with the mounted police here in Louisville. They're just 3 miles down the road from me. So it's quite convenient. And those mounted patrol horses are the best because they are used to seeing literally everything from, not that we have guns at our programs, but if that noise would happen. They weren't going to go anywhere.
Yeah.
You can touch them, you can push them around, and they're not going to be affected by that. And so that's been a really cool partnership. And I think that they really like it too, because they're used to, they only get called out for parades. And now I'm like, hey, we'll come visit you anyways, outside of parade day. So it's been fun. I'm really excited to see. I always like to hear from people that like horses, but never even thought about making them a little educational tool. So hopefully this will bring it to light a little bit more.
Yeah, to see the evolution of this. And certainly you must have been elated to find, well, no one else has done this dissertation before.
Right. It was one of those, my committee was like, well, we need some more literature review. And I was like, challenge on your end, because there isn't a lot of, there's been quite a bit of research on companion animals. So using dogs or cats or anything small that we would have in our homes, as far as, because that's what you think of, is it when you're thinking of service animals, you're thinking of service dogs. Now we have service mini horses, which are actually super fantastic. One of my dogs is larger than a standard size miniature horse. So I think the world is learning that horses have quite a bit to offer as far as companionship and knowledge, and they're really empathetic animals. And so it's much easier than I anticipated to pull out the leadership lessons than before. But I need a tribe of people instead of just myself.
So I was thinking back to what you were sharing about, teaching authentic leadership as an outcome, and this idea of the Temptations obstacle course. So, kind of two questions. How do you, in addition to process, how do you assess that the outcomes are met, and then also how do the personalities of the individual horses come into play with respect to, what do you, certainly you work with them often, and I have a colleague in my department that has 3 horses, and I spend a lot of time with her family and my daughters too. I know that plays just like it does with people, and so I'm curious how you interplay that. So kind of the two-parted question: personalities and those, that likeness to working with people, and then assessing outcomes.
Yeah, so I'll address the assessing outcome first. It depends on what kind of program I'm running. Obviously, how formal I'm going to be. I do a little bit with the community around here, and they're not really looking to get anything out of it except for the leadership lesson. I focus mostly on work with youth, which we do a lot of focus groups, and I'll talk to them before and just ask them fairly vague questions regarding authentic leadership or transformational leadership, but I always try to keep it fairly positive. I don't want to dumb anything down, but it depends on what age I'm working with. So focus groups are very easy, even one-on-one interviews, mostly very casual, and I'll record those. And then at the end, I'll ask almost the exact same questions. And some of the kids will catch it and be like, wait, like, oh no, you're not learning. You're just having fun. So that for my dissertation specifically, I did focus groups, and then I also implemented the authentic leadership questionnaire. But those are 2 separate theories in models, I should say. And so we couldn't overlap them very much. The Bill George model is what I really was able to use the most. We incorporated some psychological capital, which was really interesting. So I think to assess the most knowledge gain, if you will, focus groups and interviews are the easiest way for me, because you just need to talk it out most of the time. To speak about the personalities, that's almost the most fun part for me. So we pick horses based on their safety. Regardless of their personality, we want them to be friendly. But that being said, if we've got a grumpy one that I know won't bite and won't kick, like they just obviously can't be outwardly aggressive, we'll let the grumpy one come in. So with some of the young kids that I worked with, I had this really, some of the police horses are very big. And so their task was to make him back up 4 steps. 4 feet needed to move backwards. And right away they started pushing him. And he was like, why are you pushing me? So he pushed back into them instead of moving, because he felt, I don't think that they were being aggressive with him, but they immediately went physical. And he was like, game on, kids. I am way bigger than you are. He's probably 1,500 pounds. And this is four middle school boys pushing and pushing and pushing. He did not budge, not even 1 step. And so I kind of called them off, if you will. And I said, what's another way we could try to do this? And they were like, well, we just have to push him back. And I said, well, that didn't work very well. So, what's another way that you can ask him to do what you're asked? And I didn't give them any parameters. They could bribe him with a carrot if they wanted to. They were allowed to touch. So we have different parameters for each activity. And it just took one of them to have a carrot that they kind of held under his chest. So he looked down a little, and then they were like, come on, buddy, just back up. So the only words that they needed to say was back up. And he backed right up for them, and they all just, I think some of them actually probably fell on the ground because they were pretty dramatic. But it's funny, and I picked him because he was the biggest horse. He's very friendly, but he doesn't like to be pushed around. And so I knew it's very important to know which personalities you have coming in. So I used my own personal horse. Her name is Spotless. She is a girl. She is opinionated, but never aggressive. So I choose her mostly when I know that I'm going to have a pretty rambunctious group, because she's kind of like the grumpy grandma, and she won't really let them do anything. She'll pin her ears and make ugly faces at them, but she won't let them get away with anything. She will stand still. She will leave her head in a bucket. She is very determined to do whatever is the best lesson at the time. So she's 22. I've had her since she was 5 years old. So I know her like the back of my hand, which is fun. I like to be able to give them size differences. So if I know that, well, I can talk quickly about the one kid that got kicked. I do a safety lesson at the beginning of every single program, every single day. If it's 4 days, we do 4 mornings of horses have teeth, horses have feet, don't scare them, don't sneak up on them. And we were doing a similar obstacle course to the Temptation Alley and the Nice Little Obstacles, and the horse had his head in a feed bucket, and they were trying to get him to go, and they weren't allowed to bribe him, and they weren't allowed to touch him. And so this kid came up right behind him in his own, so horses only have a blind spot right directly in front of them and directly behind them. Otherwise they can see everything. And he just clapped as loud as he possibly could, and it scared all. I jumped. I'm like, why are you clapping? What is happening here? And the horse just payowed him right in the leg, and the kid fell on the ground. I'm like, oh boy. But you don't want to overreact, because you don't want anybody to be nervous. It all just supposed to happen that way. So I stood him up and made sure that he was okay, and we had a nurse there with us because it was youth, and so she made sure that he was okay. And I immediately walked over and I said, what just happened? And he was like, I couldn't get him to get his head out of the bucket. And I said, okay, well, what did you do that he didn't like? He was like, well, I think I scared him. So, well, does that happen in your life in other ways? And it turns out that he liked to use intimidation as ways to get things that he wanted. And so when we were talking about relationships and discipline and just being a good human being, it was perfect learning experience for him and for all of the rest of the people that were just sitting there watching, because all of his friends were like, oh my gosh. He got all kinds of street cred, if you will, because he got kicked by a horse and he survived. But he was nervous to come back in. And so I didn't make him come back in right away. He stood on the outside of the arena until he got comfortable, and then he kind of attached himself to me, but on the inside of the arena, which was good. And then he eventually just moved on, and he stayed away from that particular horse for the next couple of days. But we always try to make it a learning experience. Obviously, you don't want anybody to get injured, but it happens, and you just have to act appropriately. But I think it's the most fun with them because literally everything that happens can be a learning experience if you treat it the right way. And I don't know that that is the same as when we're just lecturing to our kids or doing something like that. So.
No, I love that. I appreciate you sharing that story. And I love, that this combination of the experience you have from an ag background and growing up with horses, and the lens that you have with the background in leadership. You're able to make those connections and facilitate that experiential learning with the students in a way that very few can. So that's just so fascinating. So last question. So where do you're thinking about the work that you've done, that you did for your dissertation, and what you've shared with us today, written in the article, where do you see future research headed? What are you writing about right now? Or
so that's a good question. So I really like authenticity. Ethics is a big thing here. So our program at Louisville is funded by the racing handle. So horse racing is very, very important to us, and we pass that along to our students. And it's a new field for me, a new part of the industry. But any horse racing fans or not fans would say that the biggest question that we have for horse racing trainers, thoroughbreds, standardbreds, whichever kind of racing you're talking about, is ethics. Are they treating the horses appropriately? Are we being ethical in our decisions? And so I've kind of been charged with bringing that out a little bit. Most of our racehorse trainers are they have their ways of doing things, and they're very private, and they know that the public is always watching them. And so I'm hoping to use what I do as a way to kind of break a barrier with them and show them that the more we can spotlight the great things, and the more I can show that we're doing the right thing and we're treating the horses appropriately and we're doing the best thing for them, the better our industry will be. And so whether that's in the racehorsing world or the sport horse world, it's just going to be doing more and letting the public see more. And having a big charge for the industry is to have more people become involved. It's not just a rich man's sport. It is very much anybody, a commoner, if you will, can go interact with anybody. The mounted police in everyone's town, I'm sure, would be happy to open their doors and say, yes, look at these horses. They exist and they're fun. And so my research is going to keep going down the authentic route. Being in a college of business lends itself towards more executive coaching and very businessy things, if you will. So probably a little bit less youth driven, and more working with any level, specifically C-level executives, is quite hilarious because they're out of their element. Even the ones that pretend to be big and brave, when I'm like, well, why don't you just go grab him? I don't know how to do that. And just making them have to say, I don't know how to do that, which they probably never say in their work environment, it's really interesting. So I'm hoping to do a little bit more of that, more structured research, as far as having, real research questions and real assessments. And, maybe Bill George will hear this and say, wait a second, I should call that kid and see what she's doing for real. So, so I don't know. I'm going in a lot of directions, if you will, but this is always very fun. I take my students at least once a semester, and we do a little exercise with my own personal horses and with the mounted patrol. And so it's fun. I'm excited to be in a place where, and I say this in the article, I know a lot of people don't have access to horses, but that doesn't mean that you can't. you just might not know who to ask. And even just Googling it, equine assisted activities or equine assisted education, something will pop up, and hopefully we'll get a bunch of leadership educators out there going and experimenting with different things. So I'm gonna create my tribe, whether you guys like it or not. Everybody loves horses, so come on, help with some research.
I can't wait to see it. So anything else you want to share with us that opening your mind?
My safety motherly instinct. Don't try this at home. I've been doing horses. I'll say I'm 32, and I have been riding since I was 6, and I think that I know quite a bit about horses, and I still had a kid get kicked. So that's my piece of humble pie for the rest of my life was, okay. So yeah, seek out some resources. There's people in your area. It's becoming a little bit more common, even if it is equine assisted psychotherapy, which is much more common than the education. Those people can still help you a ton, and it's a really cool experience. So everybody go out and touch a horse safely.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Brittany. It's a pleasure chatting with you today. So
Thanks so much for having me. I love talking about it, so thank you.
You're welcome. And just a quick closer. So Pause for Pedagogy, it's an initiative of the Leadership Education Member Interest Group of the ILA, and the articles and videos are available at www.ila-net.org, and you can follow the association on Twitter at @the_ILA. Again, Brittany, thanks so much. And have a great week. And
thank you.
Maybe we'll see you at a stable sometime soon.
Yes.
All right. Bye.